Max Verstappen did not explode after Silverstone because Red Bull lost him a podium. He exploded because Red Bull may have put him in danger twice. 2 races. 2 failures. Same terrifying outcome. First Austria, where the active rear wing failed in qualifying and destroyed his session. Then Silverstone, where the rear wing failed again at Stowe, one of the fastest corners on the calendar, while Max was chasing Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari for second place. And here is the part Red Bull cannot hide from. Max did not say the car was difficult. He did not say it was unlucky. He said it was super dangerous. Because when a Formula 1 car turns into a high-speed corner, the driver is not just trusting the tires. He is trusting invisible air to hold the car down. And at Silverstone, that trust disappeared at the worst possible moment. The rear wing was not fully attaching. The downforce vanished. The car snapped. Max spun. And the scariest detail is not that it happened. It is that Red Bull had already been warned 1 week earlier. That is why this story is not really about a broken wing. It is about broken trust. And by the end, the real question is not whether Red Bull can fix the car. It is whether Max Verstappen can believe them when they say it is fixed. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Verstappen's reaction was so sharp, you have to look at what Silverstone actually represents. This is not a slow street circuit. This is not a place where a small snap of oversteer simply means the driver runs wide, complains on the radio, and resets his rhythm. Silverstone is fast, exposed, and brutally honest. The corners punish hesitation, but they also punish blind trust. And at Stowe, that trust becomes everything. Because when a Formula 1 car arrives there at full commitment, the driver is not thinking like a normal road driver. He is not gently turning the wheel and waiting to see what happens. He has already made the decision before the car reaches the apex. He has already trusted the rear. He has already trusted the air, the wing, the load, the balance, the entire machine underneath him. And that is what makes this incident so serious. Max Verstappen did not lose the car because he suddenly forgot how to drive. He lost the car because the part of the car that was supposed to hold the rear down did not behave the way it was meant to behave. That sounds technical, but it is actually very simple. Imagine leaning back in a chair, fully expecting the back legs to stay on the floor. For a split second, you trust the chair with your weight. Then, without warning, one leg gives way. You do not have time to negotiate with gravity. You fall. Now replace that chair with a Formula 1 car. Replace the kitchen floor with Silverstone. Replace the small shock of losing balance with a rear wing that fails to attach properly while the car is already committed to a high-speed corner. That is why Max was furious. Because from the cockpit, this was not just a mistake. It was a betrayal of expectation. And expectation is everything in a racing car. A driver can handle a car that is nervous, as long as it is nervous in a way he understands. He can work around a rear end that slides under braking. He can adjust to tires that fade after a few laps. He can even live with a car that is simply not fast enough. But what he cannot work around is a car that changes its behavior without warning. That is the nightmare. Because the best drivers in the world are not reacting to everything after it happens. They are predicting. They are feeling tiny signals before the moment fully arrives. The steering gets lighter. The rear tire starts to move. The car gives a hint, and the driver responds. But a wing failure does not give the same kind of warning. It does not politely tell the driver, the rear grip is about to disappear. It just happens. And once it happens at that speed, the driver becomes a passenger for just long enough to understand how little control he really has. That is the piece Red Bull cannot afford to ignore. Because Max Verstappen is not just any driver in their car. He is the driver who has built his reputation on taking a car to the absolute edge and making it look controlled. He is the driver who can live with sharp balance. He is the driver who can attack when others hesitate. So when that driver says the situation is super dangerous, the words land differently. He is not asking for comfort. He is not asking for an easy car. He is saying the risk crossed a line. And what makes that line even clearer is Austria. Because Silverstone was not the first time this happened. Just 1 week earlier, Red Bull had already seen a frighteningly similar outcome during qualifying at the Austrian Grand Prix. The active rear wing failed, and Verstappen's session was destroyed. Different fault, same outcome. That phrase is the key. Different fault, same outcome. To a fan, that might sound like Red Bull can separate the two problems. One issue in Austria. Another issue at Silverstone. 2 incidents, 2 explanations, 2 boxes to tick. But from the driver's seat, that distinction means almost nothing. Because Max does not feel the paperwork. He does not feel the engineering report. He does not feel which exact component caused the problem. He feels the rear of the car disappear. He feels the downforce vanish. He feels the car snap away at the point where he has already trusted it. And if two different faults can create the same dangerous outcome, that does not make the situation less worrying. It makes it more worrying. Because now the question is not just, what broke? The question becomes, what is it about this system that keeps allowing the same kind of danger to reach the driver? That is where the story starts to move beyond one race. Red Bull's rear wing system is described as unconventional compared with rivals like Ferrari. And in Formula One, unconventional can be a compliment. The fastest teams are often the ones brave enough to build something different. A clever idea can win tenths of a second. It can change qualifying. It can decide track position. It can become the hidden advantage that rivals spend months trying to understand. But there is a catch. The cleverer the system, the more important it becomes that the team fully understands its weaknesses. Because speed without trust is not a weapon. It is a threat. And that is the tension sitting underneath this entire Red Bull situation. They were chasing performance with a concept that may have offered an advantage. But after Austria and Silverstone, the conversation changed. It was no longer only about how fast the wing could make the car. It became about whether Verstappen could turn into the next high-speed corner without wondering if the same thing might happen again. That one thought can poison a race weekend. Not because Max suddenly becomes scared. That is too simple. Drivers at this level understand danger better than anyone watching from the outside. They accept it every time they climb into the cockpit. But they accept racing danger. They do not accept avoidable danger. There is a difference. Racing danger is another driver beside you into a corner. It is wet weather. It is a tire losing grip after a long stint. It is pushing the limit because the reward is worth the risk. Avoidable danger is a known problem returning after the team already had a warning. And that is why Silverstone hurt so much. Austria was the warning. Silverstone was the repeat. And the repeat is what turns concern into anger. Because after the first failure, Red Bull had a responsibility to make sure Verstappen would not face the same kind of outcome again. They may have believed they had addressed it. They may have believed the Silverstone issue was different. They may have had reasons inside the garage that sounded logical. But the car still spun. The rear still lost downforce. Max was still lucky. And when a driver says he was lucky twice, that is not something a team can smooth over with a normal apology. Luck is not a fix. Luck is not a design philosophy. Luck is not what you want protecting your lead driver at one of the fastest circuits in Formula One. This is why the emotion around Silverstone was so intense. The result mattered, of course. Verstappen was chasing Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari for second place. There were points on the table. There was pride on the table. There was the pressure of a difficult season already hanging over Red Bull. But beneath all of that was something more personal. Max had to sit in that car and feel the failure happen. He had to experience the moment where trust vanished before the corner was finished. And then he had to explain it afterward, knowing this was not the first time. That is the kind of incident that follows a driver into the next weekend. Because even if Red Bull says the problem is fixed, the driver still has to believe it with his hands, his feet, and his instincts. He has to believe it when the car is loaded up. He has to believe it when the wing is under pressure. He has to believe it before there is time to think. And for Verstappen, that is where the real damage may have been done. The spin was over in seconds. The trust issue may last much longer. But the wing failure was only the first layer. The second layer is what made Red Bull's situation even more dangerous, because by the time Verstappen spun at Silverstone, the team was not dealing with a mystery that had appeared out of nowhere. They were dealing with a warning that had already spoken. Austria had already told them something was wrong. And in Formula One, a warning is not just a warning. It is a test of how seriously a team listens when the car whispers before it screams. That is the part that makes this story so uncomfortable. Because Red Bull had already watched Verstappen lose a crucial moment in qualifying when the active rear wing failed. That session was damaged, the weekend was compromised, and the team had every reason to treat it like an emergency. Not because a qualifying result was ruined. Because the failure touched one of the most sensitive parts of a modern Formula One car. The rear wing is not just a piece of bodywork sitting at the back. It is one of the reasons the car can do things that look physically impossible. It helps press the rear tires into the track. It helps keep the car stable when the driver is asking for everything. And when that system is active, when it moves, adjusts, or changes its position to give the car a different behavior, the demand for trust becomes even higher. A fixed part has one job. A moving part has to do its job at exactly the right time. That sounds simple, but at Formula One speed, timing is everything. A fraction too late can become a snap. A fraction too weak can become a slide. A fraction wrong in the wrong corner can become a car spinning before the driver can save it. And this is where Red Bull's design choice becomes the center of the storm. Their rear wing mechanism was described as unconventional compared with rivals like Ferrari. Now, that word matters, because unconventional is not automatically bad. Formula One is built on unconventional ideas. The teams that win are often the teams that look at the same rulebook and find a different doorway through it. That is how performance is found. That is how advantage is built. That is how a team takes something everyone else saw, and turns it into something nobody else dared to create. But every bold idea comes with a price. The faster the solution, the more violent the consequences can become when the solution fails. And that is exactly why Verstappen's frustration cut so deep. Because Red Bull was not experimenting with a harmless detail. This was not a small flap, a cosmetic piece, or a part that only affects straight-line speed. This was part of the system that helped decide whether the rear of the car stayed connected to the track. And once Max had already suffered the same outcome in Austria, Silverstone became harder to defend. Red Bull could say the faults were different. They could explain that the exact cause was not identical. They could separate the incidents on paper. But to Max, the paperwork did not matter. The outcome did. And the outcome was the same. He turned in. The rear wing was not fully doing what it needed to do. The car lost rear downforce. The rear snapped. He was lucky. Again. That word, again, is the reason this became explosive. Because one failure can be bad luck. Two failures can start to look like a weakness. And when the weakness appears in high-speed corners, with the same driver, in consecutive race weekends, nobody inside Red Bull can pretend it is just noise. This was the moment the engineering problem became a leadership problem. Because the question was no longer only, what caused the failure? The question became, why was Max still exposed to the same danger after the first warning? That is the kind of question that changes the temperature inside a team. Engineers can handle pressure. They live with it every race weekend. They know the car is never perfect. They know parts can fail. They know Formula One is a fight against time, vibration, heat, load, and risk. But when the lead driver publicly calls the situation super dangerous, the conversation becomes different. Now the problem is no longer hidden inside data. Now it is out in the open. Now the whole paddock hears the driver say he was lucky twice. And suddenly, Red Bull is not just trying to fix a wing. They are trying to fix the image of control. That image matters in Formula One more than most people realize. A team like Red Bull is supposed to look ruthless, precise, and ahead of the curve. Even when something goes wrong, the world expects them to understand it faster than everyone else. That has been part of their power. Their aura has not only come from winning races. It has come from making winning look planned. Silverstone cracked that aura. Not completely. Not permanently. But enough for people to notice. Because this was not a team being beaten by a rival on pure pace. This was a team being hurt by its own car. And worse, it was a team being hurt in a way that made its driver question safety, not just speed. That is a completely different kind of damage. Speed problems are public. Trust problems are private, until they explode. And this one exploded because Max Verstappen is not the kind of driver who softens the message when he believes a line has been crossed. He did not need to create drama. The situation created it for him. A driver with his experience knows the difference between a difficult car and a dangerous one. He knows what normal risk feels like. He knows what it feels like when the car is moving around because the tires are on the edge. He knows what it feels like when the wind changes the balance through a fast corner. Those things are part of racing. But a rear wing not fully attaching at turn-in is something else entirely. That is not the car being alive. That is the car becoming unpredictable. And unpredictability is the one enemy a driver cannot negotiate with. Because Formula One drivers are not just brave. They are precise. Their bravery only works because it is built on information. They are constantly reading the car, reading grip, reading the track, reading the tires, reading tiny clues through their hands and body before the outside world sees anything.